If I had to sum up my conversation with Sachin and Stephen in one word, I think it would be inspiring. Here's two people who quit their jobs and went all in on changing San Francisco's elections so that the elected leaders reflected the will of the majority of residents in the city. A key theme of the conversation is that politics is less about complexity and more about courage. It's less about having some convoluted, complex solution to the problem and more just about having the courage to show up, to say, here's who we are, and we're going to do the day in, day out hard work of building a movement to actually influence elections. So there's a ton of practical tips in there as well. If you don't live in San Francisco, at the end of the conversation, I talk with them about how they would go about building a similar movement in another city. And also, if you do live in San Francisco, definitely check out their site. Not only do they have the voter guide and updates about what's happening in the city, they also have a newer initiative to expand and grow the talent pipeline of people who are involved in the city. So you've ever thought in your life, man, I live in San Francisco and I would love to get involved in some way. I just don't know what that looks like or how I would do it. Go to their site. They have lists and descriptions of all kinds of different activities and opportunities. So check it out. With that, enjoy the conversation.
Really excited for this one. I'll jump in and give a quick bio for both of you. Sachin Agarwal and Stephen Bacio are the co-founders of GrowSF, one of San Francisco's most influential civic organizations, reshaping the city's political landscape. And before GrowSF, Sachin spent nearly 2 decades in the tech industry, including engineering roles at Apple, co-founding a YC-backed startup, and working at Twitter and Lyft. He moved to San Francisco in 2005. And Stephen previously worked at Google, Amazon, and the Genomic Startup Council, and is a former board member of YIMBY Law. He moved to the city in 2016. Together, they launched GrowSF in 2020 and has quickly become the most popular voter guide in the city. And in 2024, the candidates they backed now hold office or a majority in the mayor's office, the board of supervisors, and the board of education. They're working to build a common sense coalition that prioritizes practical solutions to housing affordability, public safety, education, and sustainable urban development by running efficient and effective campaigns. And personally, I'm just really excited to talk to you guys, to dig into your work, how you got to where you are, and your vision for the future. So excited to talk to you both today. Thanks for making time.
Great. Thanks for reaching out, and we're happy to be here.
So let's dig in with the origin story. You know, San Francisco and in the tech industry right now, it's a craze of people talking about being high agency, of going out and changing the world around them. A lot of people gripe about politics. Very few people actually take action to try and meaningfully change the political systems in the city, states, or the country. Let's talk about what got you guys into politics, because neither of you came from a traditional political background. You were both in the tech industry. Was it a conversation over drinks? Was it some emails back and forth? What led to that moment of we should start an organization?
I had never paid attention to politics before. I was in the tech industry, and spent most of my time in California. And never thought that voting was really that important. And then in 2018, my wife and I decided to have kids, and we wanted to raise our kids in the city. And so I started to poke around and try to understand, why does a city with, the incredible talent and resource that we have, why are we off track here? We should be welcoming more people and have all the best resources available. And during this journey, I was calling different folks and learning about different organizations, and met Stephen through that. And we had this shared vision. And the insight that we had was the reason why San Francisco is off track is because we've been losing elections. We've been electing people who don't want to build housing or invest in public safety or public education. And the reason why we were losing elections is because it's really hard to know who to vote for. We have these ballots where you're voting on dozens of things. And in particular, it's hard to know who to vote for on the board of supervisors. When you have a Democrat competing against another Democrat, you can't really tell the difference between these two. So that was the insight that Steve and I had, was we got to get voters really good information about these candidates and issues. And we do that through a voter guide. And we were just so excited about it. We both left our jobs to do this full time.
Wow. I know that's something that's such a big jump, right? Like, you're in tech. There's a lot of benefits. People talk about the golden handcuffs in tech, making the financial jump to then work in politics, which is notoriously not a place where you make a lot of money. Was that something where you just felt enough conviction? You felt good about it? Was it something where you thought, maybe we'll just go for it, and if 2 years from now I can jump back into tech? Like, making that jump, especially Sachin having a child on the way or already having a kid. Both of you walk me through that decision. Was it a scary one, or was it something, hey, you're excited enough about the mission where you're just jumping in regardless?
Well, yeah, I'll start. It was a big decision, and definitely a little scary. And so I was at Google when I decided to jump ship and join with GrowSF. And Google, everything you hear about working at Google is true. It's spectacular. The benefits are amazing.
And yeah, the deadlines are all fake. And like it's a very relaxing job, honestly. And it pays very well. But ultimately, I wasn't feeling a lot of um, personal satisfaction from it. So when I moved to San Francisco in 2016, that's when I first got involved in local politics. I'd never been involved in politics before, but as soon as I moved here, I was so angry about the housing shortage and the solution is so obvious and yet we don't do it, that I started getting involved with the pro housing movement. And the first person I ever volunteered for is now State Senator Scott Wiener. And so over the period of years where I was doing more and more politics in my spare time, it all came to a head in 2020 when I was running for office for the Democratic County Central Committee. It's a minor party position here in San Francisco, but it's actually super important because it sets the endorsements of the Democratic Party in San Francisco. So I ran for that and I lost, and then the city went on lockdown, and it was just a wild time because I put so much energy into running and got completely blown out, and then we're trapped at home, and I'm suddenly wondering like, what is the point of anything that we're doing if working for so many years ultimately results in loss and the same incumbents keeping power. But the lockdown helped me reevaluate my priorities in life. I wasn't satisfied at Google, and I started helping more with some campaigns that were coming up for that November election, November 2020, which is when GrowSF started. That was the first election we made endorsements in, and I found that to be much more rewarding. And so even though I was going to leave a comfortable job that paid me plenty of money and go do a nonprofit and not pay ourselves for the first like 1 or 2 years, it was exciting and totally worth it. Sachin's story is a little bit different, though.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, when you have kids, it really changes your priorities. And no, so that was the moment for me, right? Where I'm like, okay, look, I want to now invest in their future. And that was this pivot of like, okay, I can't just think about like my tech career. I got to think about, the city that we live in and everything else, and build a future for them. And, I think one of the other things that kind of made this decision easy in a way is that when we started to dig into kind of what the problems here were, there's a little bit of background. We have a board of supervisors, which is our city council, and there are 11 members on the city council. And when we started, 9 were kind of anti-growth, like not in favor of housing, didn't want to fund the police, et cetera. And these people are actually not aligned. We're not aligned with what San Franciscans wanted. Most San Franciscans are pro-growth, pro-business, pro-housing. And these folks were winning by just hundreds of votes. So I say all that because when I saw all of those pieces, this problem is actually very easy to solve. We didn't quit our jobs to say we're going to go tackle this enormously complex thing and we have no idea how to solve it. Like literally it's like if I can swing a few hundred or a few thousand votes in the direction of what San Franciscans already want. So we just need to give them good information. We will win. And we have been, and it's been great.
Sometimes I say Sometimes I say we have the easiest problem in politics because the people are already with us. They're just voting for people who pretend they're with you and then vote the other way.
Well, let's dig into that, both in what you just highlighted, the marginal gap of you're just convincing people to vote with how the majority of San Franciscans feel, but then also the timing, because it strikes me that going out in 2020, Stephen, you mentioned lockdowns as a turning point for yourself, but it was also a political turning point for a lot of people. And I know, especially on social media, 2020 was a particular moment when people became aware amid lockdowns of political dysfunction. And it seemed like it was a turning point for San Francisco. So tell me more. It seems like you guys struck at a particular moment where that gap in the market was something where there's a lot of fuels for your fire and you could easily capitalize on it. Is that how you reflect on those years?
Yeah, definitely. I think COVID really exposed a lot of the problems that the city was facing. Right? I think for many years, we had so much abundance in the city, so many businesses here, so much money coming in that it covered up a lot of the issues that we had underlying. And then lockdown happened. People started working from home. Businesses were closing. Schools were closed. We saw an uptick in crime. And people were looking around saying, where's the leadership here? Like, who's running this ship? Why are the schools still closed when private schools are opening? Why are we not helping the businesses that are suffering? And I think people woke up and they realized oh my God, the people in City Hall are not getting the job done. And that's what led first to the school board recall, then to the recall of the district attorney. And so, yeah, I think it was this turning point, and really fortunate for us to kind of be there. And that like was the springboard for, all of our election wins.
Yeah, I think I really highlight the school board recall as the is that was the catalyst for everything. It made so many people so angry that public school kids were stuck at home, falling behind, and all the private school kids were back in school. And it was only because the Board of Education didn't care. That like you could some people may disagree with that, but I would say the Board of Education literally did not care that kids were stuck at home. What they were more concerned about at that time, while everyone was at home, all the schools were closed, they were renaming schools. They were trying to erase Abraham Lincoln. They tried to take off Dianne Feinstein's name of the schools. That was more important to them than getting the kids back. And, people will tolerate a lot, but when you mistreat their children, that's when it's over for you. And so the school board recall was a surge in not just angry parents, but angry everyone, because we all know that kids are the most important thing. And so everyone came together. It was the biggest margin I've ever seen in any San Francisco election to recall these three school board members. And the city's never looked back. They've realized change is possible.
In politics, people often talk about how the greatest gift you can have is the perfect enemy. And it strikes me that you all, in the early wins that you've had so far between the DA's office, between the Board of Education, between members of the Board of Supervisors like Dean Preston, you've had a lot of these political opponents that are like, you don't have to make things up in your attack ads or anything. You can just point to the policies, like you're saying, hey, they're renaming schools while kids are at home. Do you worry about that in the long-term future? Like if you guys are successful to the point where it just is very different as you continue to grow and win, that you couldn't have designed better opponents for when you were starting.
It's always good to have a foil, but you know, I always think winning is easy, governing is harder. And people ask me how I was feeling after the local election this past November, ignoring the national, but locally, even though we won, we got our majority. We were both suddenly faced with like, okay, well, now the hard part begins. And I'm not worried really about losing foils because it's never been about opposing people. GrowSF has always been about building a better city, looking towards the future. And so we've done the easy part. Now the hard part begins. We need to deliver on our promises. We need our supervisors to vote for law changes. We need to run things on the ballot. We need to reform the structure of government. We need to recruit new talent to run for office, to staff elected officials, staff commissions. We're still at the beginning of a 30-year project, and we're not going to stop.
I want to dig into all of that. But to start, I want to talk about your positioning. So you were just hinting at right there. You all emphasize common sense in a lot of your messaging. You also have a brand of pragmatic idealism, right? It reminds me of the Teddy Roosevelt quote of, keep your eyes on the stars, but keep your feet on the ground. You guys focus on the idealistic version and vision for the future of San Francisco. You're also focused on specific elections, specific policies. Did you have to think long and hard about that? Or was that more just a reflection of your own personalities, your own views of the city? And like you were saying earlier on, there's a shared common vision of the city that is just glaringly not reflected in the politics. And so we just need to tap into that.
Yeah, I think initially, a lot of it was just intuition, and I think a lot of it was just common sense, right? Like we know that people want public safety. That's always going to be top of mind for everyone. They want to have good public education for their kids. And we know we're facing a huge housing crisis in San Francisco and in California and broadly. So we kind of knew that those were going to be key issues. But then the other thing that we do now is we do a lot of polling, and this is really important. So we're paying a polling company to do a statistically significant citywide poll regularly. So we understand, and we're listening to voters to understand what they care about and what their top issues are. So this is important, not just for us to know what's important, but we also want our legislators and our leaders to know what's important to voters, so that they're working towards those problems and prioritizing those things. And one of the other goals of our poll is we want people in San Francisco to know what other people in San Francisco think. So as an example, you might have been scared in the past to say, I want more police officers. But actually, most San Franciscans want to double the police force, if not more. You might have felt in the past that you can't say, I don't want tents on the street. But actually, most people don't want to allow street encampments. And so we want people to feel like, they don't need to be afraid to say these things. Actually, these are just common sense things that we all want. And if we all know that we all want them and we can all push City Hall towards those things as well, we can get these things done.
I love that. I want to talk more about your transition now going from outsiders to insiders. But before we do that, I want to dig into some tactics. This might not be as interesting to the broader audience, but I worked in political campaigns. I continue to work as a public affairs advisor. I think you all represent a lot of the best forward-thinking tactics to run an effective yet efficient campaign compared to how a lot of consultants approach it. You bring kind of that digital marketer mindset of being data-driven through your polling, of using like digital advertisements and messaging and being digitally native, as well as just the voter guide itself, right? Being easily accessible to voters and explained in plain language that anyone can understand. How do you think about your tactics versus others?
I think there's many parts to that answer. So number one, we always start with the facts. We never lie, and we are very clear to label when things are objective facts and when things are our opinion. So go read our voter guide, and you'll see here's what the ballot measure does. Here's a financial analysis of it, which we cross-reference with the legislative analyst's office. These are the facts, and then at the bottom it says why you should vote X, or yes or no, because what we fundamentally believe in is that voters deserve good information. We don't need people to agree with us 100% of the time. If someone goes to the voter guide and they read for measure A, here's what it does, here's the financial analysis, and then they disagree with our opinion, that's okay, because they're taking the facts and they're making a different conclusion. That's 100% fine. We want to be a useful resource for everyone. And so being useful, being fact-based, leads into running very effective digital campaigns, TV campaigns, mail campaigns, because people have come to trust GrowSF as a source of good information. After the last election, we asked people, what was the most trusted voter guide for you? Number one was GrowSF. What was the voter guide you used the most? Number one was GrowSF. We are literally used by hundreds of thousands of voters in San Francisco every election because we have established a reputation of being trustworthy, reliable, and not sensational. And we don't get mad if you disagree with us. That is okay. Reasonable people can disagree.
Just to add to that, what we're really proud of is that we run really good campaigns to help our candidates win. So what we saw in the past was, campaigns would hire a political consultant. They would spin up a brand new brand, some name of an organization. You've never heard of this organization before.
These are Neighbors for Affordable Puppies,
They've got 10 words, right? You just figure out the order that you want to put them in. And then they would send you glossy mail. And we all get, dozens, and I think it's the last election, over 100 pieces of glossy mail. And you're like, is this moving votes? This is not moving any votes. Give me a break. And there's no way to measure if those glossy mailers are moving votes or not. So they just keep doing them. And even if they lose elections, they just keep doing it the same playbook, election over election. And so this is where we brought our tech backgrounds into what we do at GrowSF. We're like, wait, we can actually measure things. So let's go ahead and do that. And so we literally run randomized control trials, experiments, to see what works. Now, we're just giving people good, honest information, but what we're testing is what channels work, or, what framing works, what language actually works. And so we do that kind of testing. And then the channels that we find to be really effective are YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Google. And yeah, we can now measure actually, if these channels are reaching voters. Are people coming to our voter guide? How long are they staying on our voter guide? We don't measure conversions or success to be an impression or a click. We want to see, are you actually scrolling on the voter guide? Do we have an indication that you used it and actually voted along with it? So, I think we are, completely, running very, very different style of campaigns than what we saw in the past. And, and so I think that's what we're really proud of, that we can, reach so many voters with actually a really small budget. So in this last election, we spent about $2 million. And we had half of the voting electorate come to our website. So 200,000 people visited our voter guide in the last election period. And we did a bunch of other digital ads that, on YouTube and some mail. So, it doesn't actually take a lot of money to win these elections.
Some of those tactics might sound rudimentary to people in the digital marketing world, or, table stakes, right? For most people running massive tech marketing campaigns. But having worked in politics a long time, having been a political consultant, I've spun up some of those brands in the past. I've seen how it works. And even having worked at a place that was relatively tech forward compared to some old school shops, people would be surprised at how old-fashioned public affairs firms or just campaigns in general can be, in part because tracking causality, all those types of things, people just don't often do it, and the system can be dysfunctional, so it doesn't matter as much.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're bringing just the basics, table stakes, best practices. And I think that was one of our key early insights, is that we can just do this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not rocket science. You're not catching reusable rockets with chopsticks. You're running A/B tests on which channels are most effective. Well,
Right. Totally basic stuff.
so the power of GrowSF is in part, or rather, I should say, the effectiveness of GrowSF is in part because you had good candidates to offer, right? You think about this last election, you had a lot of really good candidates who you could recommend to people could vote for that then shape the outcome of the election. But had those candidates not been putting themselves forward, the voter guide may not have been as effective. How are you guys thinking about the long-term talent pipeline and making sure that you always have good candidates and good policies to recommend in your future voter guides, so that you're not stuck in a situation where you're picking among the least bad option?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this next stage of GrowSF. We just launched GrowSF Talent last week, or by the time you hear this, about 3 weeks ago. And we've already gotten about 100 people reaching out to say, I want to volunteer. I want to run for office. I want to work in City Hall. I want to work in a city department. People from all walks of life. We've got trees who are like, oh, you know what? I want to serve on a commission part-time. And we've got college students who say, I want this to be my career. And the important thing is we need people to be ready to serve the city, right? This is, like I said at the beginning, this is a 30-year project. We can't just wait until a year before the election and be like, oh my God, is there anyone available to run? No, we need to make sure that people have the skills, they have the training, they know how to run a campaign, they know how to manage a staff. All of these things are super important, and it's almost the most important thing, right? More important than the campaign is, do we have qualified people? I like to say we don't necessarily win the campaigns, the electeds or the candidates win it, because you can't make a bad candidate win, right? It doesn't matter how much you spend. If you're supporting someone who's going to be bad at the job or who can't campaign, like they're just going to lose. So we need to foster really, really good talent who knows how to run an organization, who knows how to run for office, and who believes the things that the average San Franciscan believes to make San Francisco the best version of itself.
One thing I'll add that's been really exciting is we're seeing people, I'm Steve touched upon this, reaching out to us to get involved, who didn't pay attention to politics before and had never considered running for office. And so we're expanding the talent pool here to some really, really smart, really passionate people who are excited to jump in for the first time. And I think that's critical, right? Like, if you take Bilal Mahmood, for an example, he unseated Dean Preston in District 5. His background was as a researcher, I think, and then, in tech. And he decided, look, there's some really big problems here in California that I want to tackle. And he left his prior career to do this. And so we want to find more of those folks who want to, maybe shift their careers and do something else.
I think it's brilliant. And I think I'd mentioned this to you before in a previous conversation. Like my dad, he was an elected official for 20 years on our local water board in the Inland Empire where I grew up, the type of role that you don't necessarily think about or even know exists. But he had a friend through work and connections that said, hey, you'd be a good fit for this. We need people who understand the industry to run. And yeah, he ended up spending 20 years on this role and he loved it. And it was an opportunity for him to serve. But people don't do those types of things unless other people give them that nudge, let them know, hey, this is a thing that you can do. And there's a clear, easy, maybe not easy, but clear pathway for you to do it. So I think that's really great that you all are opening that up and filling up that talent pipeline. I wish you a future where the voter guide is almost moot because there's so many great candidates in the pool, but I'm sure there's plenty of years ahead before that's the reality.
Yeah, I think so. A few years to go, but I dream of that future too.
I want to talk about how your view of politics has shifted if you think back compared to when you started. Because I think a lot of people have a vision, they have a mental model of politics, especially in the tech world. I think in tech, I don't know if this has changed with Elon's increased engagement with politics, but I think before a lot of people viewed politics as from the tech world, maybe as it's kind of backwards. It seems like there's a lot of obvious solutions that people maybe they just are ignorant of what it takes. And it's just kind of a frustrating mess. How has your view shifted from when you started and to where you are today?
My view of politics did change, but it changed before we started GrowSF. So I read this book called Politics is for Power by Eaton Hirsch, and it lays out the basically two paths of engaging with politics. One is as a political hobbyist, and one is, I forget what he calls it, but I call it as a political operator. So a hobbyist is someone who reads the news every day and they're doom scrolling and they're posting on Twitter and Reddit, and maybe they're even going to protests. Like all of that is hobbyism, right? Posting a hashtag on Twitter or on Instagram, setting your display profile to have a frame of like, stand with whoever. None of that matters. Politicians don't care, but it makes people feel good. That's what a hobbyist does. An operator goes door to door and organizes people to do things. An operator gets people to vote a different way by either giving them good information or influencing their opinion, right? Politics is for making the world different, not for self-gratification. And so I think to anyone who's interested in politics, the most important book you can read is Politics is for Power. I think to your question on,
I haven't read it, so
well,
that's a problem.
okay, I should read it.
Some homework for you. So you can finally figure out how politics works. Yeah.
Right. To your question on the like tech industry and how they engage with politics, as former tech industry people, I feel like we can speak pretty authentically about this. I don't think anything is unique to the tech industry. People like to attribute behaviors to whatever job you might have, and I think that's reductive and frankly condescending. But you hear it all the time. Not to say that you're being condescending. The average person has a view that is relatively distrustful of politics because if you don't know the levers to pull, you feel like a victim or you feel as if nothing matters. And I think for a lot of people that is true. They are merely going through life being told what to do by people in power. And that's a very frustrating experience for a lot of people. And so a lot of people will just check out and say like, well, I don't follow politics. It doesn't matter. Or they will do the political hobbyism. And none of that is unique to the tech industry. None of that is unique to any industry. And so as a former political hobbyist myself, I absolutely sympathize. Um, I think the big change in San Francisco is, like we said earlier, the school board recall showed people that you can just change your government, right? If you're not happy with the people in power, you can literally just collect signatures and get them out. And then we did it again with Chesa Boudin. And we've done it again and again with electing new people against incumbents who everyone assumed would win. So the change, it wasn't the tech industry waking up, it wasn't anyone engaging necessarily differently with politics. It was merely the realization collectively that we can change our city for the better.
Before starting GrowSF, politics just seemed like this like big opaque thing, like this huge system. How can you actually get anything changed? Just impossible to navigate. But one of the things that we say now, which I think is like so key, all the problems that we see, in San Francisco or in California or anywhere, these are all policy decisions. And the fact is you can undo or change any policy. And just that insight was like so clarifying of like, okay, great. Like, this thing that you don't like, this money that we're spending that you don't agree with, that, is being wasted. Great. We can change that policy. And so like, once we got to that point, it's become like so empowering now where you're like, there's nothing that we cannot fix, especially in a place like San Francisco where you have the talent and the resources, right? We're not lacking in money. We're not lacking in smart people. Just our policies are bad. And so now you could take a really, systematic, view on this and just say like, okay, let's make a list of all the bad policies, prioritize them, and just start at the top. And let's start knocking it down and fixing them. And we are seeing that happen now. So, we've had this new administration, new mayor, and a new majority on the board for, 3 months now, barely 3 months. And we're actually seeing policies change and outcomes being delivered.
Yeah. Like people love to shit on government workers, but like Sachin saying, The key insight is things are bad because we have decided to make them bad. The people who work in government, they're doing their job. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But we have decided what they're supposed to be doing is bad. So I have a rule. I never shit on bureaucrats. I always give them the credit they deserve. They're working hard. They believe in the system. I only shit on elected officials because they're the people who have the responsibility to change things. And that's who we're going after. We're making sure that we're electing people who want to fix the things that we've broken.
Everything that you all have just said, well, first off, I 100% agree. And everything that you just said, I think, fits very neatly into a broader conversation happening across the country. I know this is coming out a couple weeks after we record, but just this past week, Governor Newsom sat down with Ezra Klein on his new podcast. There's this whole conversation about abundance. And a lot of the points that Ezra and other people have made in that movement are the very points that you just made, that government is often dysfunctional because of rules put in place by government. Those are not laws of physics. Those are rules that are created by people, and they can be changed. So therefore, if government's getting in its own way, we should be able to change those things to enable government to be more effective, particularly for Democrat and progressive cities that champion public sector solutions more so relative to Republicans. They should be the ones more than anyone hoping to see government be as effective as possible. So I'm curious, now that you have seen some success in San Francisco, I imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, that people from other cities have called. I'm sure they want to launch their own grow, insert wherever. Do you feel like the environment that you entered and operate in San Francisco is unique relative to other cities that you might have spoken to, or even statewide reform in California? Or do you think the approach that you take could be scaled, could be duplicated elsewhere, either in other regions or statewide?
I think there are some things that are unique about San Francisco, like the fact that we are both a city and a county. That means that we have, 11 members on the board of supervisors, which is our city council, and so pretty small set of electeds that control a lot. And we are fairly small populations, a population of 800,000, 500,000 voters. Those are pretty unique. I think broadly across cities in America, most people want the same thing. They want the basics to work, and I think that there is a disconnect between what the outcomes that people are demanding and how they're voting. And people are, I think there's opportunity to provide good information in a lot of different markets.
And on abundance, I love Ezra Klein. I think he's really smart. But ideas don't move votes. You have to do the work to change government. It's one thing to say, these are my ideals, and I want a future that is like that. And it's another thing to say, these are my ideals, and I'm going to work every day to make it happen and bring people along with me. That's what we're doing at GrowSF. We're working every day to change the San Francisco government to deliver on those goals of abundance. More affordable housing, more market rate housing, more housing than we know what to do with, more police to keep everyone safe, and just a city that works. You have to do the work.
There's a lot that I love from what you just said. I often think about the unique elements of San Francisco, as you were just laying out, Sachin, relative to Los Angeles, where you have such a large region, 80 plus cities within the county, fragmented governance across so many different jurisdictions that even just keeping track of all the different elected positions, who they're responsible for, and what the differences are across the candidates, it's much more challenging. But yet at the same time, particularly after the fires, there's a lot of questions and agitating for governance reform. And so the similar movement that I think people are feeling in San Francisco, they have been feeling in LA. You saw it in the most recent election too, even down here with our DA getting removed. So I think you're right that the principles apply regardless, that providing trusted information and aligning with the will of the majority tends to be a winning political strategy. And like you were saying, Stephen, on abundance, I think that makes sense too, that just this week I wrote an essay, or a couple weeks now, on, I think I titled it, Abundance Has a Power Problem. You can talk about abundance all that you want, but until the political incentives change for the people who are in power, until their reelection hinges on whether or not they choose to enact common sense reforms, the outcomes will not change. And I think that's what so many people don't understand about politics, or rather what I tell people from my work as a political consultant is you'd be amazed at how much you can influence outcomes just by showing up with a few people. It doesn't always take an army with pitchforks. If you just have 5 people who are passionate about a specific topic, who are real, who are genuine, and you can find a way to help them and make it easy for them to show up in some form or fashion, that can be enough at the local level to dissuade someone from taking an action, because now they realize there's some political blowback that all things being equal, I'd rather not face that.
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead.
Agree, but we also disagree that should be the tactic, because
Right.
we don't want those 5 angry people with pitchforks to be able to, determine,
Right.
what policies get passed or how our elected officials behave. So actually, one of the core things that we believe in our work, we do a lot of advocacy work, and our advocacy work is rooted in make sure the vocal minority does not win, and that people do what most voters want, and we're doing, the right thing for the greater population. And so, yes, like people should absolutely volunteer. You should absolutely show up. You should absolutely email your supervisor and official. But we want to make sure officials are doing what is best for the city or the county or the country as a whole.
Yes, that's a good point. And I think that's only possible to change with a small number of people when the silent majority are not showing up. And I think part of the brilliance of GrowSF is you're building a long-term, durable coalition that's not based around a single person. Because oftentimes similar reform movements have been sparked, will continue to be sparked, but oftentimes are really just, vestigial organs of an individual who wants to run for office and wants to create a common sense brand around themselves. We've seen that in different cities, and sometimes it works, right? Like a Bloomberg in New York, he can do that. But oftentimes it doesn't always work when people try and duplicate that. And so I love that you guys are building for the long term, and that it's not about either of you as individuals. It's about a movement that reflects the will of the majority. I just think that that's unique, and most people aren't willing to take that path when they launch a reform effort. I realize that's not a question. That's more just a statement. But
Great.
one area where I want to always drive conversations that I'm having, and the focus of my writing, the goal of my writing, is to try and share and spread more positive, proactive, also pragmatic visions of California and what you view of the state. I feel like if anyone goes to your website, you're pretty clear in your ideals and what you wish for the future. But, when you all sit back and you're talking about the future of California, or Sachin, when you're thinking about your 2 girls, what do you dream about for the future of California? What gets you excited? What do you hope to see happen in your lifetime?
I spent almost my entire life in California. My parents immigrated here when I was 3 years old. They opened a small Indian restaurant. They were able to buy a small home, send me to good public schools. That dream is impossible to do today, right? Like, we haven't built enough housing. Our public schools are going through some tough times. This is really sad for me, right? And so the future I want to see in California, obviously we can talk about the specifics of more housing, better public transportation. I want to see the high-speed rail line actually get done, like those kinds of things. But one thing I was thinking about recently was what I love is that our key metric is in our name. I want San Francisco to grow. I want California to grow. So actually, I want to look at, in 5 years, in 10 years, 20 years, and I want to see the population to go up. And if that hasn't happened, then everything we have done has failed.
My vision for the future of California is the same as the future I envision for San Francisco. It's a place that's affordable for the middle class again. It's a place that it's easy to find a place to live. It's a place where you can send your kid to public school and know that they're getting the best education in America. I'm a product of public schools. Went to public schools my whole life, with the exception of 1 year at a Catholic school when I was really young. I went to the University of Florida, which is a public school. And you know what? Florida schools are better than California. And I don't think that should be the case. Not that I want Florida to fail. I just want California to succeed. And we had in this incredible University of California system that was extremely well funded, producing top scholars, and anyone could go to. And that's not what we have anymore. The schools are underfunded. Now you got to pay tuition. It's not free anymore. Why? Actually, I know why. It's because of Prop 13 limited the amount of money we could fund schools with. But it's not just about money. I think that's the mistake that most Democrats in California make. They think if you just allocate money, the problems go away. That's not true. You could allocate $1 trillion to the problems in California and not solve them, because our laws don't allow you to solve them. So with the high-speed rail, it's 20 years behind, something like that, because we have bad laws. It's too hard to acquire the land. It's too hard to get the environmental approvals. It's too hard to actually schedule construction. It's the construction labor is really expensive because the cost of living is really expensive. The materials are really expensive. We don't produce enough in California. All of these things are downstream of bad policy choices, which we can change and we must change. California needs to be a state that is growing. I totally agree with Sachin. We're going to lose congressional seats in the next redistricting because we've lost population to other states. That is a failure of our government. That is a failure of the reform movements of the past, and it's time to change it.
And maybe just to say, why do we want California to grow? I mean, we live in the greatest place in the world. I mean, we have the best weather, best resources. Down in LA, you've got the entertainment industry and so much great stuff happening there. Up here, you've got the tech industry and so much happening here. Across many, many different industries. Like innovation is here. People have come to California to like pursue their dreams and build a future. And right now, our population is declining. Like this is just so sad. So we got to get back to being like the hub for immigrants and dreamers and builders.
I had a friend recently ask me about my own political beliefs, and I ended on the line of saying I'm a California maximalist. Like, I just want as much California as possible. I want California to grow. I want everyone to be able to enjoy the life that my family's been able to enjoy as a fourth generation Californian, just on both sides of my family, people who left challenging circumstances elsewhere to seek opportunity here. So everything you just said was music to my ears. I realize we're almost at time. The last thing I want to end on is if, let's imagine I'm sure there's plenty of Stephen and Sachin's and other cities around California, around the country, who are thinking, man, I wish I could see similar type of change happen where I live. What would your message be to someone who's thinking about starting something similar to what GrowSF has been able to achieve?
My message is you can just do things. Just do it. You don't even need to quit your job. You probably should, though, because you need to do it full time. It can't just be a hobby. It has to be something that you're going to dedicate at least a few years of your life to. And, it's high risk, but it's really high reward.
I think very specifically, just start writing about what, the future you want to see. Start a Substack, start publishing content, and just speak in normal words. Just talk about what you wish was happening. And you'll probably find that there are other people around you who want the same thing. And that's how you get the ball rolling. You don't need lawyers, you don't need money, you don't need to set up any entity.
Yeah.
Just find like-minded people and get together and get going.
Be
Perfect.
the friend among your friend group. Be the friend who knows things about local politics, because everywhere in California we're voting on too many things. In San Francisco, last election, I think we had 48 things on the ballot. I remember in 2016, the first time I voted here in San Francisco, the ballot was 8 pages long. No one has time to understand all of that. Be the friend who knows things. And then people will come to you. They'll start voting the way you recommend. That's how you build power.
Awesome. Well, here's to all the future Stephen Sachin's and other efforts around the state and around the country. And here's to the future GrowSF. Thank you all so much for joining me and for taking time to talk with me.
Thank you, Jarrett. This has been a pleasure.